I see a lot of people are already logging in. Good to see so much excitement. We're so happy to have all of you in this webinar. This webinar is brought to you by Inspire One, and it's called Leading Through Tempestuous Times. It's part of our UNI Leadership Webinar series. We've been doing this webinar for our colleagues, for our prospects, for our audience out there who would be interested in learning more about how to be a good leader in these times. So let's move on to your speakers for today. Firstly, let's start with Miss Neeta Mola. Neeta has over 3 decades of experience, of which around 20 years has been in the area of designing and developing learning solutions for clients across industries and across locations. She's got expertise in leadership development, succession planning. She is an emotional intelligence coach, certified facilitator. Neeta is also the author of Human Drama Inc., which is a book which is based on her experience of over a decade in this field, and it explores EI in the workplace. Neeta, we're really happy to have you in the webinar.
Thank you very much, Vikrant, and a big warm welcome to everybody in this webinar.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, next, let's move on to our second speaker, Mr. Sumit Sani. He is an expert facilitator. Sumit has trained more than 6,000 people in workshops, these workshops have been conducted all over the globe, in India, Thailand, Middle East, China, you name it. He's also conducted very senior management programs on topics like strategic thinking, execution, innovation, digital transformation, change management, customer centricity, sales leadership. The list is just genuinely too big to go on. Over the last few years, he's also been helping leaders to develop and implement strategies in this complex and uncertain business environment. So we're very happy to have you here, Sumit, as well.
Thanks so much, Vikrant, and good morning, everyone.
So without further ado, let me just pass this session to Sumit, and we hope you have a great session.
Great. Thank you, Vikrant. And good morning again, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this session on leading in tempestuous times. I thought that, as we begin the session, it'll be good to clarify to the group why are we calling it tempestuous? Why tempestuous? And then, what is it that we can do as leaders to continue to navigate in these tempestuous times? Now, when we look at the definition of tempestuous as a word, and if we do a Google on it, or search in the Cambridge Dictionary, tempestuous time is typically a time which is full of strong emotions, and these strong emotions can be very positive, they can be extremely negative, but in tempestuous times also what happens is that people move from one strong emotion to another strong emotion very, very rapidly. Now, when we look at the context that organizations and leaders are operating in today, we are already living in a very strong tempestuous times, right? I mean, if you look at globally as well as in India, what is going on, there are many drivers which is, causing this. One is obviously the layoffs that are happening both around the globe as well as in some of the organizations in our country. Then there is also obviously the war, the impact of the war, and it's not just one war. There are multiple wars, that are getting played, which all cause concerns to all of us to say, where are we headed, as a world, and what do we really need to do around it? Similarly, there is immense amount of profitability pressures. I was reading yesterday a report published by PwC, which is a global CEO survey. And the big item, the big issue in their mind is really around profitability. How will we manage our profitability as we prepare for the future? And it's really becoming more of a day-to-day issue. And overall, there's a lot of unpredictable environment that we are operating on. Plus, what's also happened is that in the last, 1 year, maybe for some of us, particularly in the last quarter or so, there's also been a whole amount of loss, right? I mean, loss can be loss of someone in the family, loss can be, loss of just business, loss can also be loss of credibility. In fact, what the research is also finding out, and there are multiple researches which are pointing out that in the current context, there is an increase, in the case of depression and anxiety generally with people. So, for example, one of the Gallup's research found out that around 44% of world's employees have experienced anxiety. Another Mercer report pointed out that 81% of workers are feeling burnt out. 5 out of 10, people in India have actually faced depression. They may not sometimes know that they are undergoing depression, but it starts with anxiety, high blood pressure, and things like that. And we've been doing a lot of coaching sessions with senior leaders, and when we do some of these coaching sessions, these are examples of sound bites that we have been hearing increasingly. So the narrative is increasingly around some of these issues that leaders are facing, around the stress level being too high or being unable to sleep. The targets have increased. There is so much of pressure. So the point, team, that we're really trying to say is that we are living in obviously a very tempestuous time. It's going to continue at least for the next foreseeable future. And because of that, emotional intelligence, though, was always a very critical imperative, a very, very critical skill. But now, that imperative is becoming even more important because, as we all already know, that the mood and the tone that a leader sets has an impact on anyone who they really lead. And therefore we thought that this was a very critical topic to pick up at the start of the year to frame the plan, for the entire year, for all of us. Now, we've done a lot of research in this particular area. We've been working on emotional intelligence as a dimension for now more than 25 years. And a few months ago, we published a pretty interesting research around emotional intelligence for managers and leaders in India. So I'd like to start off by asking Neeta a quick question. Neeta, could you tell us a little bit about what is this research telling us? What are the aspects of EI that we need to focus more on as leaders?
Yeah, so thank you, Sumit, for that context. And, it sounds very dire. It sounds like, it's very tough and very hard, but there are some streaks of good news. In fact, a lot of streaks of good news as well. But coming back to the research, I just want to share with everyone here that we have been conducting research based on the profiles of emotional intelligence tool called the personal EQ meter that we have. I'll just explain that now. So what we measure is three aspects of what is called intrapersonal emotional intelligence. How self-aware am I? How well do I understand myself, my emotions? What about my ability to speak authentically? And also how objective am I? Then we have another area around which we look for information and data through this tool, which is around self-management. And this is largely to do with, how well do I handle my stress? My impulse control, to what extent does that help me or not? Then the extent to which I feel reliant and self-reliant, and also my ability to handle change, which is adaptability, and then problem solving. The next area that we measure under this tool is self-motivation, very important and critical. Three components that we look at over here are optimism, achievement drive, and the extent to which I feel content, which is to do with how happy, joyful can I be. And then there are two aspects that are measured around the interpersonal capacity. So these three were to do with self, and interpersonal capacity is to do with my emotional intelligence vis-a-vis others. The first aspect being social awareness, the extent to which I can understand others, read their emotions, etc. And then social skills, which has two components, which is interpersonal capacity and interpersonal skills, and then there is group orientation. So this is what the tool measures. It's a tool which was developed through a lot of research and is fairly well founded in research. It has been tested for validity, etc., over the years, and also in the Indian context. Now, the interesting thing that we found when we did this research and we looked at these managers' profiles, so these were Indian managers, and the period that we're talking about is very current. So I would say just a little bit pre-pandemic to say 22. And we studied the profile of about 1,500 participants who had taken this tool. Of course, the tool was taken for their own understanding and their own development, but we put this together and created a report which brought out certain strengths that they had and also areas of development. Now, Sumit's question is that what do we really focus on? So I'll also like to focus on certain strengths that these managers demonstrated. and also certain areas of development. However, overall, if I really look at this research over the research that we did last time, which would have been another 7 years back, I do feel that the overall, emotional intelligence scores have grown a little bit, which gives us a very good heads up to know that this is a focus. It's not something that people are now denying or they don't know what it is. They know what it is, they understand it, and they understand that working on it is very important. So I think that's the first good news. Also, if I look at what is it that through this profiler we found as strengths, so 3 clear strengths. The first one is objectivity, which is the ability for people to, see what's happening in an objective way. So separate facts from, let's say, emotions, and look at real situations and instances from a more objective standpoint, which is very good, which means that people will therefore be able to understand what's going on, be able to be cognizant of it, also problem solve. The second important strength that came out through this research was stress management. So as you can see, and I think this is fairly visible now, people are cognizant that they must take care of themselves and their stresses, and the amount of stress management actions that people take to manage their stresses is within the realm of people's awareness. So people are taking more actions in this area, and you can see that the score is moving. By the way, one very good news that I want to point out overall is emotional intelligence components can be worked upon. So it's not something which is a fixed intelligence, it can be improved. And the third thing, which is also not very surprising, is the aspect of group orientation. Again, of course, culturally, we do believe in groups, we do believe in families, we do believe in, teams and so on and so forth, which gives us a very good leverage to be able to use this strength to manage some of the areas that we may not be very good at. The areas that we're not very good at, or at least this particular group was showed as areas of concern. And again, another good news is it's not very, very low. So even the low scores are within the realm of, say, 4 to 5, which is moderately alarming. It's not alarming. The first one over here, which I want to point out, is contentment. It's the last one shown in the screen in red. This somehow has been a score that very consistently has been coming low over the years. And contentment, if I was just to describe it, we'll take this a little bit more in detail once I go over the overview, is very critical in terms of, having the energy to cope with tempestuous times. Then we have optimism, which also is lower, which, corresponds to hope and perseverance, etc. And then we have self-expression. So these 3 have been found as being a little bit on the lower side. Now we'll just deep dive into these 3 components a little bit more to understand what these are, and therefore as a combination, what they could be also telling us. Contentment is when we find it difficult to experience joy. So sometimes it means that I may have everything in the world, but I still don't experience the emotion of joy. I still don't, experience the emotion of happiness. And when this is sort of over a long period of time, this is not worked upon, then it does lead to a person feeling more low as opposed to feeling positive. And it's not just negative and low, it can also lead to at a consistent level, if it is not handled, to depression. So earlier when we were seeing that, the data that 1 in 5 people could be suffering from depression, and depression, by the way, has become very rampant. Also, of course, India stands out simply because we have the numbers. But besides that, we do have a population which is going through a lot of depression now. So depression or low contentment really means that, it in an organization context, people will have to really push themselves hard, or, spend more energy in order for them to be able to handle the task at hand. The second one, optimism, which is also very important and critical in tempestuous times. And Sumit, to your question that, is this an area of focus? This has to be an area of focus for almost all organizations, I would imagine, because we're talking about resilience. The fact is that these times are not going to change. For how long, we don't know. How worse will they get? We don't know. The only thing that we know is that if we learn to cope with it, then we can. So optimism is when we generally see the glass as half empty. So there is a little bit of a negativity or a negative frame. And again, in times which are uncertain, and if we start feeling very low on optimism, together with contentment, and by the way, both these come within the realm of self-motivation, a person can demonstrate very low energy to act or to really push themselves, to boundaries which they need to in difficult times. So that's optimism. And then we go on to the third one, which was low, which is self-expression. I just want to give an example here of an organization that demonstrated low scores on all these three accounts and what was the challenge for them. So this is a bank, and these scores were low for a group of people who belong to, the HR community. So they are HR partners across the country, given the mandate to lead change or to enable change, not lead change, but enable change. That was the mandate. And when these three, incidentally or coincidentally, these three aspects were low in this group. And after, of course, we spoke to these people and we tried to find out, what we really came to understand was that for this group to enable change is going to be very challenging, because they don't have the energy, and in change you really need that energy. So any transformation requires a lot of extra energy. You don't know whether this goal is going to be successful or not, yet you have to feel very optimistic about it. And then the third thing, which was even more debilitating for this group towards this task, was the fact that if they don't feel right, they're not going to express it. So they're just going to be there's a term used in our report, a little bit of silent sufferers. So I'm going to suffer. I'm not going to speak my mind because I don't believe that there is any point in doing so. And as a result of it, my own actions will be so half-hearted. How am I going to really lead this organization into the change and the transformation that it requires? So there was a lot of work that we actually did with this group in terms of, picking their energies up, seeing how they can learn skills of expressing themselves, and first of all, understanding why this is going to be so important and critical. And that became, the foundation of really being able to play this role more effectively. So, yes, just to summarize, all these aspects are going to be important, but I would definitely say that, we need people to be more self-motivated through these tumultuous and tempestuous times. We need them to consciously work on areas like contentment and self-expression and optimism. So that is going to be absolutely important.
It's a very interesting finding because, when we look at, optimism as well as contentment, in the model that you were displaying with the team earlier, and if I relate back to the Daniel Goleman model of AI, it's all related to self-motivation, the first two components. So effectively, how do we continue to motivate ourselves as we go through the tough times is definitely one of the critical elements. And the multiplier effect of all of these three is quite significant, right? Because when I'm not feeling positive, I'm not feeling contented, but I also have low self-expression as a person, it means I'll not express it. I may not find it adequately right to even express some of these emotions. Now, so a quick follow-up question over here is that what can we do as leaders to unlock optimism? We know that, optimism is, for example, one of the core issues here. So what can we do to unlock that?
Yeah. I'm just going to spend a minute or two just on understanding optimism, and then we can go into, unlocking it. So as you know, we were talking about earlier, we need everyone to be more resilient, and optimism makes us more resilient because there's hope. There is this feeling that, all right, maybe we can get out of it. And therefore, bouncing back or resilience becomes very important. Perseverance becomes very important because we're not going to succeed just in the first time. We have to go on and on and on, and then somewhere we will see success. So hence, optimism is very important for both resilience and for perseverance. It was actually I think Seligman, who brought out this concept of learned optimism. I'm sure a lot of people in the audience would know about learned optimism, which means that, it's a frame of mind that we can change. And therefore, how do we change this frame of mind, which is your question about unlocking optimism? Various tools have been there in the market for some time now. So one of the tools, of course, talks about reframing. Anything that happens to us, supposing the pandemic happens or the war happens, and we say, oh my God, this is the end of the world, or the earthquake that has happened yesterday or 2 days back. I mean, it's really, really devastating, right? Even in the most devastating times when we feel the world is going to come to an end, or this is all over for me. How do we reframe in that situation and say, well, yes, this is awful, but what is it that I can, for example, learn from it? Or is there another way that I can look at this situation and scenario? That is the tool of reframing. When we learn that anything that happens to us is not permanent, it's not personal, it's not that it's only happening to us, and it's not pervasive in all areas of our life. There is some parts of our life that we can retrieve even in the worst situations and try to work upon or try to improve. And that is where we learned optimism can be something that, can be taught and can be, learned through practice. However, I just want to also talk about optimism, one more aspect of optimism. It's not that, when we become optimistic now, we have to be disassociated from reality, that we have to become these airy fairy people, kuch nahi kabhi bhi hoga and everything will be fine. No, that's not what we're talking about. In fact, what we're talking about is being able to live paradoxically. And I'll explain that. What do we mean by that? So for example, how can we be calm even when we are very worried? This is a paradox. Like, I mean, if I'm going through extreme anxiety, how do I practice calm? Can I do that? And the answer to that is yes. A lot of leaders have actually demonstrated that, in difficult times. I think it was the erstwhile New Zealand Prime Minister who said that I refuse to believe that you cannot be calm and be very tough. You can be both, or you cannot be very I think the word was compassionate and not be very tough and strong. So this paradoxical way of looking at things is something that we can cultivate and is very important and critical to cultivate. I'll give another example. Some of you may have heard about the Stockdale paradox, but I'll just give a quick brief about it. So it was this. It's based on this Admiral Stockdale, who was a Vietnam prisoner of war. He was an American admiral. He was a prisoner of war, and for 7.5 years, he bore a lot of this torture. And he came out of this and he said that, the only reason I survived because I had this unshakable belief that I'm going to come out of it, which is really optimism at its very high level. But I never ignored the brutal reality on the ground. So I think one of the things that I'm saying over here is these are moving on from reframing. Some of the new things that are coming up, especially because we're talking about tempestuous times, is learning to be a paradoxical leader. That's one. That's very important and very critical. And being able to look at, building ourselves to not deny or discount what is happening, but also the ability to draw upon positive emotions. So earlier, positive emotions we drew upon also by saying that practice gratitude, because anytime you practice gratitude, you feel positive, you feel very good. Another emotion that people are talking about practicing is practice awe. And that is very possible, right? I mean, you go for a walk and you look at the vastness of nature and you're in awe. And then you see how positive you feel just being in that situation and that state. So in the worst of situations, how do we paradoxically, while we are feeling, anger, we're feeling fear, we're feeling sorrow, how do we paradoxically also feel joy? How do we also feel awe? These are some of the new things that we can, sort of look upon or look at. However, I'd like to also just talk about a very quick takeaway for everyone. And I think this one framework or these 4 principles that we can look at can really, really help us to be more optimistic, to be more resilient, to be more effective in the times that we are going through. So the first principle is at any point of time, and of course, we don't have to do it every day, but we have to know this. We have to know what is our purpose and vision. It's becoming so important and critical because we get caught up in crisis after crisis after crisis. But if we can even link the crisis to our purpose and vision, the crisis becomes meaningful. So knowing our own purpose and vision, adapting it periodically, we have to keep looking at it and saying, okay, this and not that. And also looking at all the key roles that we play in our life and what is the key focus of this. So our North Star or our direction comes from this. So yes, I'm a colleague at work, and at all times in my role as a colleague, the role that I want to play is that of being whatever it is, supportive, innovative, whatever it is. That is something I'm going to hold on to. And that is something that I'm going to link to my purpose and my vision. So that is very important, the knowledge of this. And I also want to tell the audience that you'll be surprised how few people know this. Sumit, you're talking about coaching. I'm also going to talk about the coaching experiences where almost in every coaching experience, I get people to undertake this exercise, because otherwise, and people say this, I may be achieving a lot, but I don't feel good. And you will not feel good because you don't know it. So it's very, very critical and important. And the three things we manage on a day-to-day basis is our emotions, our energy, and our time. Emotions, we talk about three emotions, which are, the ones that really need to be managed, which are anger, sorrow, fear. Three emotions, that's it. And then we manage, and then of course we try to leverage all our positive emotions by being paradoxical every day. So I'm not going to, in the worst situations, maybe there's a death in the family and be sorrowful, all of that, but yet I can practice and maybe have gratitude in that situation as well. And that's what I'm going to try and learn to do. The second is managing energy, which is really the aspect of what we looked at earlier partly, which is the stress management piece, which is how do I make sure I'm sleeping on time, I'm eating well, my well-being is looked after. And, I have energy. I don't have this negative energy that's pulling me down. And therefore, contentment becomes very important to work upon over here. And then, of course, your time. Time is precious. Time is precious and very democratic, only 24 hours for whoever you may be. So managing these three things with keeping a view on the overall vision and purpose really helps, because there's so many examples of how people find meaning in the most difficult and trying times. And people look back and say, these were perhaps the most valuable periods of my life. So that is the opportunity, and that's what can help us to build more optimism. Sumit, I think I've gone on and on. Yeah.
Great. So I think now that we've sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to, I thought I was going on and on. So I thought I would also ask you this question because there's so much of work that is being done in terms of leadership. So what do you believe that leaders can do to manage emotions of others?
Absolutely. I think I'll talk about it in a little bit, but before I do that, if I go back to the previous slide, I think this image on the right-hand side has always kind of captured my attention, and largely because as a leader, what one has to do is to solve problems, right? There are problems related to business, there are problems related to people, there are problems related to life in general, and at least what I've realized is that it's very hard to solve a problem when you're looking like this, because when the facial expressions are like this and the body language is like this, when the mood and tone is like this, then the quality of the problem solving itself becomes very tough. So the real change, the real challenge is to intentionally, and the key word here is intentionally, something I'll talk about a little bit more, to move away from this frame of mind to a more positive and an optimistic frame of mind. Now, going back to the question around what can the leaders do to manage emotions of others, maybe I'll set a little bit of context before I talk about some ways of doing the same. When we look at leadership in general, effectively, when we think about the role of leaders, we all as leaders have to manage two main worlds. One world that we all need to manage is really the world of facts. The world of facts, is got to do with managing the business, the profitability, sales, productivity, cost management, growth, inflation, and elements like that. But equally very critical is for us as leaders to manage the world of feelings, which has got to do with my own feelings, feelings of others. Now, first of all, I think it becomes very critical for leaders to really acknowledge this, that I do really need to manage both the worlds. There is a world of facts and there's a world of feelings. And each leader may not be equally capable of handling them. So it's important to realize which part am I generally comfortable with and how it can become dysfunctional very soon. Effectively, what we're also trying to say is that in the paradoxical world that kind of Neeta, you alluded to, it's critical for leaders to really lead both from the head and the heart. This entire combination of just thinking from the head, which is largely around problem solving around the world of facts, and the heart, which is really looking from the world of feelings, and getting this knot in place becomes very, very critical. And therefore, to realize very critically that in the world of heart, we are always role models, or generally in the world of head, we are generally role models, because we look at the business first and we look at what can we do to enhance the, let's say, profitability. But even in the world of heart, to manage the world of feelings, it's the leaders who are setting the standards, right? So what effectively happens is that we set emotional standards for other people by displaying the type of emotions ourselves. If we display the negative, the pessimistic side of our emotions, we are kind of setting those same standards for everyone. And that's the tough part, to set the right emotional standards, not just the qualitative standards, the KPIs and the metrics, but also the emotional standards for yourself and the organization. Now, to talk about how do we do this, I like to talk a little bit about some fabulous research done by Professor Dan Tomasello of Columbia, who really published this book called Learned Hopefulness. And his entire premise is that hopefulness or positivity can be learned by being intentional about it. Now, what his research has found out is that high hope people or high hope leaders really choose to make certain decisions, and the important element is choice. The important keyword here to focus on is, in the tempestuous time, one needs to become more deliberate and intentional about choosing these things. Largely because research after research has also found out that human mind is a lot more attracted towards negativity. So chances to fall back into a negative spiral is a lot more, unless we make a deliberate intention to keep ourselves, focus on the positives. Now, what are these 7 principles? I'll talk about them one by one and maybe add a couple of examples in the process. The first one is really to look for possibilities, right? And maybe I'll kind of give an example of this. So, like a month ago, there was a leader that I was coaching, a business leader, and one of the key issues that he was having was that actually his business has been doing quite good in his organization. And he says that, now what's happened is that my target has been increased by almost 70%, which is okay. But now my bigger problem is that there's a part of my business that I need to give to some other business vertical because of some re-strategizing that the organization is doing. And he said that, what I'm really thinking about is I can create a strategy, but how do I align my own team with this particular strategy, because they're going to come back and they're going to say that part of the business we're giving to someone else, so it's not possible. Now, one of the core issues that I realized was that in our coaching conversation was that he was looking for possibilities himself by developing his business plan, his action planning, and all of that. But it's very critical for him to let others also imagine possibilities along with him. And therefore, we started thinking about a team meeting, and we said, okay, how will we frame this in the team meeting? And therefore, one of the key things that we encouraged him was to say that, okay, let's get people together in a room. Let's reframe the problem as it cannot be done to how can we do this? And let's start an ideation process with them to look for possibilities and uncover possibilities along with them, rather than to give them a list of possibilities that they have to react to. So one very critical component is to really just continue to look for possibilities and ignite that light in others. The second very critical element linked to gratitude is really to notice the good. But let's again look at it from a very practical perspective. Another leader that I was talking to, what in his case, what had happened was that he had recently moved into a new role within the organization, and he was not very happy with his team. So the problem was that every day when he used to come to the office, he used to, like I'm wearing these specs, he used to, wear a negative lens in his eye, and used to keep on evaluating the team members reporting to him and say, this person is not good here, this person is not good here, this person is not good here. And that started a negative spiral. So his own energy, his own passion started going down. And the problem is, even if objectivity is high, if the optimism is low, optimism will attack objectivity and objectivity will fall down. So one of the things that we had to start looking as a ritual or as well as a practice was to just say that, okay, let me spend a week in just pushing myself, because I have this tendency of being overly focusing on the looking at negative attributes of others. Let me just focus on each individual and say, what is good about this person? Maybe that person is very sincere and hardworking, may not be very capable, but having a sincere and capable colleague is a very big strength, as an organization. And that actually started putting this person into a more positive spiral, where then he could focus a lot more on positive actions with the team. The third critical choice or the decision that we can take as leaders is to deliberately cultivate positivity. And this is really around planning the communication side of positivity a lot more. The type of communication that we send, the type of language that we use, the type of positive affirmations that we give makes a whole lot of difference to create that positive culture within the team, and also positivity internally. The fourth decision, and I'll not spend too much of time around this because it's somewhat linked to what we've already discussed, is around using the strengths, right? Maybe I'll still give an example. Last month, there was a strategic planning session that we were doing with top leadership of a large manufacturing organization. Now, this manufacturing organization has been going through periods of peaks and troughs, largely led because of the pandemic, but also the economic volatility. And we were looking at the 3-year plan, the 3-year strategy. And like it typically happens in the strategy sessions, the team had created a SWOT, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We looked at the SWOT, and the team was moving on from the SWOT. And what I just asked the team to do was, let's just take a step back. Let's go back to the SWOT. And can we just only focus on the strengths? Because what happens is that when you create a SWOT, there is so much of focus on the weakness that it becomes a conversation which is disempowering. But when we started just having like an hour-long conversation around what are our strengths as an organization, and how do we take this forward, and how do we build up on these strengths, and how do we make them from tactical strengths to strategic strengths, the type of strategies that they came out with were very, very different, a lot more empowering, a lot more positive. Now, moving into the next point, the other element, and this is actually very, very critical, is that leaders who are being able to create a positive culture are also taking a decision to adjust goals as required. Now, adjusting goals over here has got multiple perspectives. One part of the perspective may be not going for originally what was planned, but adjusting it as times kind of unfold. But the other component is to set up micro goals, to focus on the concept of breaking a larger goal into monthly, daily, or weekly goals. And the reason for that is very simple, that success breeds success. If I achieve what I need to do on a daily or a weekly basis, there are higher chances of success, to be able to adjust goals accordingly. Obviously, it's critical, that we engage with purpose. I'll not spend too much of time because Neeta's already spoken on this. But engaging with purpose has also got a lot to do around answering one question in everyone's mind. Why am I going through what I'm going through, right? If there is crisis, if there is volatility, if there is depression, anger, anxiety, all of us, I'm sure at least in the last 1 year, have asked ourselves this question, why am I going through this? And the answer to that lies in purpose. Setting up the purpose of the team, setting up, helping them to co-create a purpose, linking the purpose to their own individual purpose becomes very critical. And the last, but not the least, is really around just cherishing others, enjoying the company. And cherishing others is also about building a strong relationship community within the teams that I lead as a leader. So that because when people build deeper relationships with each other, they're more happier. In fact, one research around employee engagement has found out that one of the big drivers for employee engagement is if I have other people in the team that I am proud of. So if I have respect for other team members, then I'm generally more happy as an employee. So to also, create those forums of just cherishing others, building that team feeling. Now, I've spoken about the 7 things. Maybe we can ask a quick question to the audience right now. I know there are some questions that you have, which we'll come to in a little bit. But let's do a quick poll here. So I've covered these 7 principles. A quick poll, that I like to ask the group is that out of these 7, decisions, which are those 2 that you think leaders in your organization can improve on? And the way we'll do this is that my colleague Vikrant will now activate a poll. Let's see what results come out. So the poll should be visible to you now. If I can request all of us to pick 2 that you think that leaders in your organization can improve on, I can start seeing some results already. Okay, maybe Vikrant, we can end the poll now. Let's see what results have come out up till now. Okay, so I'm assuming that we are all able to see the results, but almost 50%, of the group said that, our leaders can become better in cherishing others or engaging with purpose. And then there is almost an equal spread in the top 3 areas of of noticing the good, cultivating positivity. But I think if we just focus on these 2, right? How do we coach leaders? How do we, as leaders, just focus on these 2 points of how do I engage with purpose? With people. I'm about to get into that team meeting. How can I inspire them with the right purpose at, in that particular meeting? How do I cherish others? And how do I help other people cherish others? There's a whole amount of positivity that can get along. Thank you, everyone, for sharing this. Now, before we, go back into some of the audience questions, Neeta, I'd like to ask one last question to you, because I don't think we've discussed that point enough, and that is around self-expression. What our research also found out is that there is also less levels of self-expression. So can you talk a little bit about, what happens when this is low?
So this is very interesting because I'm also looking at the poll that we just conducted. So the 2 values or the 2 characteristics that really underpin self-expression, the first one is having respect for self and others, cherishing others and also cherishing self. I will not be good at self-expression if this value is not a part of my system. And the second one is the need to be authentic. So when self-expression is low, then of course the 2 aspects that clearly get impacted by this, one of course is confidence and the other one is esteem. So imagine the meeting. I'm taking the example of the same meeting, Sumit, that you were talking about. It's a very volatile meeting. People's emotions are running all over the place and amok or whatever it is. And then there are certain people in this team meeting, some of them who've decided to be passive, which means that they've decided no point giving your view. We know this is wrong, or I know this is wrong, but nobody's going to listen to me, or the big boss is not going to listen to me. Let it just happen. I will be passive, but somewhat aggressive as well, passive aggressive. And then there is another group that could be aggressive in this meeting, which means that, because this is so emotionally, what should I say, activating, people could get aggressive. People could state their point of view in a way which is not respectful to others or violates others. And both these aspects of expression are really what is low self-expression. You can imagine what will be the outcome or the output in this meeting if this was the case. So self-expression is very critical. And the key words that I want to emphasize here are to be authentic and to be confident. If these are low, then we cannot be authentic and we cannot be confident. Now, I mean, how do people really do this? And maybe I'll just also quote another, Aristotle's quote here, where he said that to be angry is easy, but to be angry with the right person in the right way, in the right, right place to the right extent, that's what is self-expression, and therefore it is it's a very advanced emotional skill, and it's a skill which requires us on one end to manage our emotions, but to also value ourselves and value others equally, and be authentic in being able to speak our true feelings, our true beliefs, our true views. And can that be done? Yes, of course. Again, I'll referring to the pandemic here, where leaders very often talked about the fact that they are confused. They don't know how they're going to lead in this time. But they know, and they're going to ensure that everybody does their best in this to pull out of the situation. So one very quick tip that I want to talk about when we're talking about self-expression is for us to start using the power of emotions by using what is called emotional language. So very often we say, okay, this is the situation, this is my view. We give our thoughts, we give our views. But if we also start stating our feelings, I'm feeling very excited that we can do all of this together, or I'm very confused, but I know we can get out of this situation. So, being open about it, which is also being authentic, will build confidence in the leader, because it'll give permission to the leader to be authentic, and it'll also build confidence in the team, because the team anyways knows that the leader is emotional and is entitled to certain emotions. But when those emotions are expressed in a way which is not very critical of themselves or others, then these emotions are accepted, and people work with the energy of these emotions to also express themselves well. So it is one of the most critical ones. And in fact, I just thought I would end this with a quote, which is, which now, of course, we have neuroscience to back whatever we say. So this is Judith Glaser, who's saying that neuroscience is teaching us that self-expression might be one, if not the most important ways for people to connect, navigate, and grow with each other. So imagine these meetings where there is honest communication, there is respectful communication, that people are communicating emotions with each other. It's the best way of building collaboration, inspiration, teamwork, all of that, and, working with people. So, I mean, yeah, that's what I would just like to say around self-expression, Sumit.
Thanks so much, Neeta. And I think a very, very critical point, because a lot of times what can happen with leaders is that they can stop their own self-expression by saying that, should I be sharing, my emotions with others? Sometimes it can be with positive, that if I share my positive emotions, will people become more arrogant? Will they become relaxed? Sometimes it can be with negative emotions as well, that if I share my concern, will it, puts across me as weak? But the problem is that till such time we don't express ourselves, we are not allowing other people to express, themselves, and therefore the authenticity of the conversation, is not really there. So, in fact, I also really believe that authenticity as a leader really requires the skill and the capability of self-expression to truly come out.
Yeah.
Great. So thanks so much, Neeta. What I'll do, everyone, is let me just conclude, and summarize some of the points that we've discussed, and then, we'll have 10 more minutes to go. We'll take some questions from the group as well. So we started the day by, talking a little bit about tempestuous and what it means. And, what we looked at was that it's a time of extreme emotions. We looked at the reasons why. Once we did that, then we looked at some original EI research to say where all we need to focus more on. And what research is telling us is that there are three areas: contentment, optimism, and self-expression. We've looked at some possible ways and methodologies of enhancing that, not just for us, but for others. And we've had this conversation around self-expression also as a leader. Let's now take some questions, from the group. I know that there are a few questions already in the chat screen. But to the others as well, please feel free to post your questions on the Q&A, and we'll take some of them. So maybe I'll take one question, Neeta, and let me ask you this question. So one question that has come up is that, what if the long tenured staff who are settled in comfort zone and having a change resistance, having them supported by top management? So what can we do around this?
Yeah, no, I remember our experience of working with certain organizations where, frankly, there's a large set of people just waiting to retire. And clearly, this was a group that was settled in well. So, it was not that they were the urge to really achieve a lot was very high. But I think that in any situation in life, if we define the purpose, and if we get the group to look at the purpose, of we define the purpose is not for us, the group has to define the purpose, define their own purpose, and define the purpose of whatever time it is that they're spending in the organization. What is that purpose? And if that purpose can be linked to the organization purpose, then there is some amount of energy that can, sort of get generated. Because at the end of the day, even if I'm retiring, even if today's the last day of my life, I want to live a life which is worthwhile. I do, as a human being, want to live a happy life. That agenda doesn't change whichever state or stage of life you're in. It's just that the way happiness is defined can be different at different stages of life. So to me, the important thing is really to give them a fresh purpose. And I remember, Sumit, I think you would recall this too. I think we're talking about also people who were very skilled in one area, and they had reached that level that, they couldn't be displaced or moved because the skill was so high. But when we gave them a fresh purpose of how they can mentor or train the next level of people, and that was something that they felt would really sort of carry their legacy forward, there was this release of energy. So I think that the idea really here is to find out what are those buttons that we can find out, we can create for this group, which will motivate them into a happier state, a state which is more meaningful. And then, of course, that state has to be then sort of leveraged to also achieve organization goals.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. There's another question, maybe I'll take that up, which is around, for women leaders, self-expression is low in my organization. And, how do I increase that? So my own perspective on the matter is that, self-expression is generally low. It's not that we've found any specific trends, by gender in this particular case. But if within an organization, if self-expression is low with a particular minority group, whether it's women leaders or other minority groups, it's typically an indication that the level of inclusivity within the culture and the psychological safety does not really exist. So the core problem to solve really will become the managers of these leaders, because they may not really be setting the right standards and an environment of psychological safety where people are finding themselves to express. I know this is not a session on inclusion, but just to make up a point over here, even in inclusion, what we're realizing is that unless you consciously include people, mostly you're unconsciously excluding them. If I do not promote, a culture of psychological safety in the teams that I lead, I may feel that there is no problem with it. But unless but other people may find it still different to express. So I think the problem lies generally somewhere else rather than with the cohort of a particular, area itself. Another quick question that has come up is, around, let's say I'm just kind of scanning through this. Even some of the most progressive leaders in my organization are sometimes wary of being vulnerable because they don't want to be seen as not tough. This affects their self-expression. How do we continue building the perspective that vulnerability is not a weakness? So Neither, do you want to take that?
Yeah, vulnerability, when a leader shows vulnerability, actually draws people, the leader is able to draw a lot of people onto themselves. I think the key thing here is this balance or this paradox. You can be vulnerable and you can be tough. It's not either or. One needs to be vulnerable. So, for example, I know of a situation where layoffs were happening. And in this situation, the layoffs were happening not, with people who were not performing well, but also people who were very good performers who had stayed on in the company, who'd helped the company to grow. But simply that particular aspect of the organization was not required in the new context or, going forward. So they had to let go of all these kind of people. And again, in this situation, where the leader has to address this group of people who are very angry, who are, the mindset is that how can you do this to us? Or what makes you do this to us? And the leader calls for a meeting with all these people who they're going to let go. And their managers are also there. And the manager's body language is, sitting back, that they really don't want to engage in this conversation. But the leader then expresses his vulnerability by saying that it's not my first choice. This is not something that I would have ever liked to do. And I really, and then uses empathy, but shows his vulnerability by expressing himself and expressing his emotions, and then goes on to really sort of saying, but this is the decision that has been taken. So quite tough in terms of taking that decision. And then moving on to saying, where is this organization going to go forward from here, and why are we really doing it? So in that same meeting, the leader was able to show vulnerability, but also, stand by his tough stand and show that toughness or demonstrate that toughness. So I think very often we feel that if the softer side of leadership, if we express that, then people will say that we are weak, or we'll feel weak. But I think we feel human or humane. But the key word here is that we can't only use that. We have to use that and also use the leadership attributes, which are very important and critical and sometimes not very popular. We have to also use that. So I think balancing it out is what I would say is very effective. It's not either or, it's both and.
Wonderful. Neeta, there is one more question which I'll, again request you to talk about. So one of the questions is that there are leaders who are obsessed in self-expression, wherein they completely neglect other people's emotion. Won't that be too damaging in the large group? And how do we decide what is the right parameter for self-expression?
Yeah. So self-expression, like in the beginning, what I said is respecting self and respecting others. So a person who's only tom-tomming about themselves or their ideas, not listening to anybody, that's not high self-expression. That will show up in self-expression as low. So self-expression typically is, one part of it is definitely about being authentic, stating your point of view in a way which does not violate others. But that's not enough. You also need empathy to understand that other people's views are important. You need group orientation to involve or to engage with the group and to get their views into, the scene or scenario or situation. So a leader has to use all of these. Here we've broken it up, but it's not that this is not high self-expression, that I'm obsessed with my own voice or my own story and I'm going on and on. This will show up as low self-expression in our tool.
Exactly. Yes, I think the other thing is that, just linking it back to executive presence, when a leader speaks for a long time, there are some leaders who can just ramble it out. Then it's actually weak self-expression. It's not high self-expression, because the messages will get mixed up, quite a lot. Another question that has come up, which I'll just pick up, I know we have 2 minutes left, is can you comment on functional freeze, and how to cope up with this? Now, if you look at the concept of functional freeze, it's really a simple psychological concept which says that whenever we feel as humans under threat or attack, we freeze. Because our defense mechanisms is generally to freeze so that we are able to control and save ourselves. Now, in the functional freeze is really something similar that most human people, human beings, not all, but most of us, when we feel that there is a tough time, we can freeze because that defense sometimes is the best way to protect yourself. But the issue with that is that when we get into the concept of functional freeze, the amount of innovation starts going down, the creativity starts going down. And instead of thinking about noticing, looking for possibilities, noticing the good, unlocking our potential, there is a tendency to be defensive and wait while the tough time goes on. So it's important to recognize it, that it exists. And if it exists with me or, as an individual, then to take deliberate actions. And therefore, the concept of deliberate that I was mentioning earlier, deliberate and intentional becomes very critical. I know we are already out of time, so we're really sorry that we're not able to take, the balance questions, but we want to be respectful of people's time. What we'll ensure is that some of these questions, our team is able to look at it and then at least can respond over emails. And otherwise, you can always feel free to reach out to us. We are happy to have one-to-one, meetings or call as well. Thank you so much, Neeta, for your time today. I think it was really a great session as usual. I've learned quite a lot. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking our time to attend today's session. Neeta, anything last you like to share with the group?
No, thank you. Thank you for your time. I mean, I think it's very, very elating to spend time with the group, with the team discussing this, deliberating on it. So thank you very much, and wish you all the best and look forward to more interactions.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.